Hello fellow cyborgs and welcome to my July reading wrap-up. Today I have a few adult books to talk to you about and then a buttload of children's picture books at the end. I won't be talking about all of the adult books that I read in July in this video because I've talked about them in some other videos already. So make sure you watch all of my videos if you want to know everything that I have been reading. The first book I want to talk to you about is Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. This is a highly autobiographical YA novel about Echo. She is a young woman growing up in the 1980s or 90s. There was something definitely dated about the references, but I couldn't pinpoint a year. Maybe that's because I was listening to it on audiobook and I missed it. Echo has some magical abilities which she shares with her mother. These most often appear in times of trauma, and there is quite a bit of trauma in Black Girl Unlimited. But the thing that I loved about it was not only how it was semi-autobiographical, and not only the magical element of it, but I went into this book thinking it would be true fantasy, that Echo was a wizard, that this was a second world narrative, that wizards exist. But to me, it felt more like magical realism. The magic that Echo can do, I think you could read more as psychological defense mechanisms rather than true magic. And that is one of my most favorite tropes in books, is when magic or a magical presence could be truly magic, or it could be something else. I didn't expect Black Girl Unlimited to be quite so traumatic, but I still really connected with the characters and really loved how it was dealt with. And hearing Acacia, who has survived sexual violence, talk about Black Girl Unlimited, it sounds like she thinks that this was done really well as well. So this was a wonderful book that came out of nowhere. I was reading it for Acacia's Patreon book club, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I thought I would give it a try since my library had the audiobook available. And I just loved it. I read it really quickly. I binged listened to it while I was doing some art projects, and it just blew me away. It was wonderful. So 5 out of 5 stars for Black Girl Unlimited, and I think I need to own my own copy. Another really excellent audiobook that I got from the library was Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is the nonfiction that picks apart the racism inherent in the criminal justice system. His organization specifically helped defendants and inmates who were either up for life in prison or specifically to the death penalty. I have only heard great things about this, and I too really appreciated it, and I've given it 5 out of 5 stars. I've read about and seen various documentaries on the mass incarceration issue and the racism inherent in it, but I hadn't previously thought about how those racist ratios would be trickling down to the people who are in prison the longest and who die in prison. I was horrified to hear about how many juvenile defendants are treated like adults in the court system. This is one of the best mixes of nonfiction for me, where it is part memoir, part factual, informational. It has a narrative flow, but the facts and information is woven in seamlessly. It meant that it was a really easy listening experience. It was easy to continue listening, even though the information that was being imparted was pretty devastating. I think this would be a great nonfiction to give someone who doesn't know very much about the mass incarceration issue or hasn't read a lot about racial injustice at all. I think it's really approachable, but also really visceral. It gets to the heart that this is a huge immediate problem. So 5 out of 5 stars for Just Mercy. I need to buy my own copy of this as well and annotate it. I buddy read Where the Line Bleeds by Jesmyn Ward with a friend. This is the story of twin brothers and how after their high school graduation, their paths diverge in a rural Cajun town in Mississippi. This takes place directly after Hurricane Katrina, and that kind of touches on it, but that's more just so you know what time this is set in. This is the second book by Jesmyn Ward that I have read. However, I didn't expect very much of this because though I rated Sing Unburied Sing a 4 out of 5 star rating, I remember so little of it that I didn't really expect this to make an impression on me either. However, I'm really glad I gave this a try because this was excellent. I loved how the diverging paths of Joshua and Kristoff not only showed you the daily oppression that living in a rural community and being Black means, but it also touched on aspects of colorism since Joshua is lighter skinned and has softer textured hair than Kristoff. The thing that blew me away completely though was the writing style, which I don't remember particularly loving in Sing Unburied Sing, but in Where the Line Bleeds, the description of their town, Bois Sauvage, would come in and lighten the mood between otherwise heavy scenes. And those nature passages were just absolutely magical. So Where the Line Bleeds really impressed me and definitely makes me want to read more by Jesmyn Ward as opposed to being a little iffy about it. So I'm really glad that I read this and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I also buddy read Sugar by Bernice L. McFadden with Sarai from Sarai Talks Books. The setup for Sugar is that this is set in the 1950s and Sugar moves into a small Christian town. She's a sex worker, so this is big town gossip. Her next door neighbor is Pearl, who has been through traumatic events. Her teenage daughter Jude and her only daughter was horribly murdered, and the aftermath of that is the first scene in this book. Pearl has kind of stalled in living because of this, and her relationship with Sugar starts her healing process. I really enjoyed the writing style. I was really impressed with such a short book how much characterization and character development happened. The relationship between Sugar and Pearl was endearing, and I loved how we took the time to hear not only Sugar's backstory, but the backstories of some of the other characters as well. This is one of my favorite things whenever you have a cast of characters and they all matter. This book definitely is dark. Sugar has had a pretty traumatic life, and at the climactic moment of this book, it gets even darker. I didn't really know how I felt about that, and I thought that the ending was a little bit confusing and that there were almost 3 endings to this book, but I connected so much with the characters and really want to see what happens to them that I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. We will hopefully be buddy reading the follow-up book, This Bitter Earth, sometime soon. Then I finished The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. This comes highly recommended from Helene by Books by Lane Nez. This is her favorite author of all time. On the front cover of mine, it says this is a novel in 7 stories, and I kind of don't agree with that definition. I would more comfortably say this is a collection of interconnecting short stories than a true novel. The different chapters are narrated from different characters' perspectives, and though we have some characters coming in and out of other characters' stories, there's very little true joining together of characters. And with most short story collections, you're going to connect with some stories more than others, and that's definitely what I felt with The Women of Brewster Place. I was also struck with how some perspectives had significantly more pages given to it than others, and it was kind of hard not to then compare the weightiness or the purposefulness of the different narratives. There is a rape scene in here toward the end of the book. I was forewarned of that and was anticipating it while I was reading it, and for me, that made it more easy to read when I finally got to it. It wasn't so shocking, so I was glad that I wasn't traumatized by that scene, but I did want to just let you know that that's in here. I found the ending of this to be a little confusing. I didn't understand what had happened to one of the characters who was never mentioned again, and I was kind of left just wondering what was going to happen. I did quite enjoy Naylor's writing style though, and there were a few passages that I was really struck by and really enjoyed. And I do want to pursue Mama Day by the same author and see what I think about it. But I didn't love The Women of Brewster Place quite as much or nearly as much as I was hoping to, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. For Libby Stevenson's The Bard Book Club, I read The Merchant of Venice. I was expecting to kind of hate this because I had heard that it was a very anti-Semitic play. However, I actually quite enjoyed it. I found myself empathizing with Shylock, and even though his form of revenge was pretty severe and irrational at times, I could kind of understand where he was coming from. I also really liked looking at the character of Antonio as a gay man, which just added a kind of extra faucet onto this that I wasn't expecting. And I really liked the poetry and the imagery in here, so this was actually a big hit for me. This is probably one of my favorite Shakespeare's that I've read for the Bard Book Club, and I'm really glad that I gave it a try. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, which is what I rate most Shakespeare plays. Technically, I finished Crick Crack by Edwidge Danticat on the 1st of August, but I'm going to talk about it now because it's my channel and my rules. This is a short story collection that deals with Haiti's history as well as how immigrants to America who are Haitian look back on their mother country. Overall, I liked this collection. I think my having zero knowledge of Haitian history was an impairment for my reading experience. I was able to get kind of the gist of what was being talked about and the significance of certain events, but I think that if I had known going in what they were talking about, these stories would have been even more powerful and impactful. So that was kind of my bad. And thinking back to the stories in here, I remember them pretty well, and I can tell you what like the main punchline of each story was, so to speak, or the main theme. But I had a really hard time connecting with them. are emoting with them. So I don't quite know what that was about. Overall, I enjoyed them. I liked the writing style, but I didn't love it. I liked the imagery and folklore and the themes in here. I learned some things, but I had more questions than answers, though, I mean, that's not this book's job to educate me. So I think that I would really like to do some research on Haitian history and then return to this short story collection or this author specifically. I think with the context, I would get a lot more out of these stories. So for now, I'm rating this 3 out of 5 stars, but I'm pretty sure that I will get more out of it if I just educate myself a little bit better. So those are all of the adult novels, short story collections, and nonfiction that I read in July, and I want to talk to you about some children's picture books that I've read, so if you're interested, then stick around. I reread The People Could Fly, which is a story by Virginia Hamilton, and it's illustrated by Leo and Diane Dillon. This story was originally in a collection, I think it's also called The People Could Fly, but then they decided to pull that one story out and illustrate it more heavily in this picture book edition. The story is about the flying African legend, which is the idea that slaves could grow wings and fly away from slavery. I mostly wanted to pick this up because I love Leo and Diane Dillon's illustrations, and I really enjoyed how by isolating this one story, you got 1.5 full pictures per page of text. The pictures are really beautiful and devastating, and the story is definitely a bummer, but also really beautiful. So I'm really glad I got this for my library, and I am planning on reading the other stories in that anthology collection and probably checking out every single book that the Dillons have ever illustrated that my library has. So 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. This is Mermaids, compiled by Elizabeth Ratisseau. This is a collection of mermaid art and then different text surrounding mermaids from different cultures. For the most part, I kind of thought that this felt like someone had used Shutterfly to paste together paragraphs about mermaids and the cool mermaid art they found on the internet, especially since the art was not credited on the page, but later in a appendix section at the end. While I was reading it, I kept getting nervous that the artwork was not going to be credited. I think this is a book that I would have absolutely adored as a child because I loved mermaid books for looking at the pictures of the beautiful mermaids, and there are many beautiful mermaid illustrations in here that I haven't seen anywhere else. But I found the quotes to be not impactful at all, really. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars, though I think maybe, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking it's really a 2-star, but I think it compiles a lot of unique imagery that isn't all in one place, and it's neat and compact, so I don't know. It's fine, but I don't think that I'm going to be keeping it on my shelves. I read Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. I didn't expect much of this. I don't expect much of a lot of children's classic picture books because, I don't know, I'm stuck up and there's no mermaids in them. But I found this actually really delightful. I really liked how Harold was able to use his imagination to solve his problems as well as just explore stuff. So this was simple, but I really liked it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars and I will be keeping it. And then we have The Melancholic Mermaid with illustrations by Abigail Halpin, and it's by Callie George. I loved this when I first read it, and I didn't upon rereading it. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. The story is unique about a mermaid with 2 tails and how that's not acceptable. She gets captured and put in a sideshow, and then there's a second perspective of Tony, who is a boy with webbed fingers, and he gets put in the sideshow as well, and they have to help each other. However, upon rereading, I noticed just how static the pictures were. For instance, this is a climactic escape scene, and the villains who are chasing them just look like they're taking a nap. I mean, there's not a lot of anything in this picture. That, among other illustrations, just kind of made me side-eyed the illustrations a little bit. And then also the ending I found just unrealistic. So I didn't love this as much upon rereading, but I still will be keeping it on my shelves. Still 4 out of 5 stars for now. We'll see what happens when I reread it again. This is Polar the Titanic Bear by Daisy Corningstone Spedden with illustrations by Laurie McGow. This is the story of this stuffed polar bear, how he comes to live with a boy, and then how he and the boy survive the Titanic. Half to 2/3 of the book is not about the Titanic. It's just about the bear and the boy's adventures when they travel with their family to different places. So I don't necessarily think calling this Polo the Titanic bear is like fair. It's kind of like a teaser for something that happens at the end. And the Titanic isn't really explored in this all that much. I guess because the tragedy is like intense and you can't really tell kids about it. I did like how the illustrations were realistic and really beautifully done, and there were real photographs next to it because this is a true story. It's based on the Spedden family and it's a family tale. Don't worry, the bear and the child are safe. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars and I will be keeping it on my shelves. Then we have Trick or Treat Little Critter by Gina and Mercer Mayer. I just kind of love these critter books. I kind of love Mercer Mayer's illustration, and this is a Halloween book, so you get to see their pumpkins and the different costumes, and I definitely read this as a child. There's nothing special about the story. It's mostly the illustrations just being cute and atmospheric, so I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely be keeping it. And this is The Witch Grows Up by Norman Bridwell. This is another book from my childhood that I distinctly remember. This is about I think this is part of a series, and I don't think this is the first book in the series, so we're coming in this blind, but this is about how the little witch grows up and how her life is. The thing that I loved most was seeing how she did things differently, but how people didn't vilify her for it. So though she has many things that are the same between her and non-magical children, it's never like the way she does things are worse. So that was the main reason why I loved this, and the atmospheric, spooky sort of illustrations. 3 out of 5 stars, I will be keeping it. This is Franklin's Blanket by Paulette Bourgeois and Brenda Clark. Franklin loses his blanket, and it's a big deal. And I get you, Franklin. I still have my blankie, and it is a big deal. The illustrations are fine. They're cute. I like them. He's a turtle. And I did like how you got to see his different friends' reactions to him telling them that he's lost his blanket. It was just fun to see how different people can be helpful or how they offer help to a friend in need. This is mostly a nostalgia book, and I enjoyed it. And I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I will be keeping it. And then we have Madeline by Ludwig Bemelmans. This is another children's classic. I specifically remember the cartoon adaptation that I watched as a child. I liked this. The drawings sometimes are monochromatic, but then when they're out in the world, they're more full color. There are many scenes of Parisian sights as the girls walk through the city. The story is simple and pleasant. The illustrations are kind of weird, but I kind of like them. So I enjoyed this. I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars, and I'll keep it on my shelves. On the other hand, though, Curious George by H.A. Rey can just go away. I did not like this. I thought that this would be a 3-star read, no big deal. It's a children's classic. We have a curious monkey, no problem. This was kind of awful. So I know that this is dated. It was written in the 30s or 40s, 1941, but Curious George gets kidnapped by the man in the yellow hat and then left alone in an apartment in New York City, and then he calls the fire department because he doesn't know how the phone works, and then they put him in jail, and then he escapes, and then at the end he gets put in the zoo and it says, "What a nice place for George to live." No, Africa's a nice place for George to live because that's where he's from. So I'm thinking that maybe the other books where Curious George is the monkey in New York City just accept it, now see what shenanigans he gets up to, might be more enjoyable. But for me, this was a story about a white dude going to Africa, kidnapping an animal, not taking care of it being punished for that, and then it being put in the zoo and that being like something to celebrate. I hated it. He also smokes a pipe at one point. The monkey smokes a pipe. This is just so dated. I would never hand this to a child. 1 star. This is Kiss of the Mermaid, a Mercer Mayer Critters of the Night story written by Erica Farber and J.R. Sansevere. Sansevere. Guess that's how I'm going to say it today. This is by Mercer Mayer, which means I love the illustrations. Don't ask me why. And the Critters of the Night are kind of like a la Addams Family, and I just kind of love them. Thistle gets turned into a mermaid to help a real mermaid whose family has been all turned to stone, and she has to outsmart the witch Veruca to do it. Vavuka, actually. Not Veruca Salt, she's Vavuka. This is fun. I like the agency. The mermaid even has something to do with saving her family at the end. It's a good time. I kind of want to read more Critters of the Night because I want to see more gothy animals drawn by Mercer Mayer. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I'll be keeping it on my shelves. This is Mermaid Island by Margaret Frith, illustrated by Julie Durrell, and this is part of the Eek Stories That Make You Shriek. This is a young reader book, so the language is very simple, and this is supposed to be a spooky story. So spoilers, there's mermaids. The big reveal is that Molly is half mermaid and her mom's a mermaid. And I guess that's how they justified it being part of this Eek Stories That Make You Shriek series. However, huge missed opportunity because we have it from plain Jane. Her name is literally Jane, the most boring person in this book. This story is told from her perspective and it is super dull. If this had been from Molly's perspective, what is it like to have a mermaid mom? What is it like to be half mermaid, half human? How do I make friends? How do I survive not living in a bathtub? I want to hear that story. So this was boring and huge missed opportunity of writing a story from a half mermaid, half human girl's perspective. 2 out of 5 stars, won't be keeping. And then I read another The Little Mermaid adaptation because those were the most of the mermaid books you could find back in the day. This is retold by Deborah Hotzig and illustrated by Darcy May. The more I read The Little Mermaid and its adaptations, the more I just kinda hate it. So the prince can just go die a horrible acid-filled death. I liked these illustrations, however, I did not like that the only character of color is the evil sea witch. So that's a problem. So I gave this 2 out of 5 stars and I won't be keeping it. Then we have The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore by William Joyce. This is a book for book lovers. It's fairly simple, it's touching, the illustrations are pretty great, it's got some fun bookish humor, and it's a little bit sad at the end, so definitely an Amanda book. I rated this 5 out of 5 stars when I first read it, and it remains a 5 out of 5 stars, definitely keeping it. I have a couple more things by William Joyce. This is A Day with Wilbur Robinson. I liked this. This is about a eccentric family and how each of the family members are weird but also fun. There's no plot really to speak of, but it's entertaining. It's also what the Disney movie Meet the Robinsons is based off of, and I weirdly really enjoyed that movie that nobody remembers. There was one really just kind of weird standout scene where there's this one scene where we have the only 2 people of color in the book, and they're just here cheering on the frogs. It's Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, and I was just a little bit like, why is this in here? Is this okay? I don't really know how I feel about this. Overall, I enjoyed it though. 3 out of 5 stars, and I will be keeping it. And then the last choice, we have The Leaf Men and the Brave Good Bugs. It's on the back for some reason. I really enjoyed this. This is about a garden whose elderly caretaker is now sick. The garden is suffering, and the brave good bugs have to go call the leaf men to save the day. There's a twist about a lost toy, and the old lady doesn't die. The only thing that I was a little bit sensitive about is there's a spider queen who kind of looks evil, and then it turns out she is evil, and I just thought that that was a really simplistic view, and even though I am not a spider lover, they have a place in our gardens, and I didn't like how spiders were vilified. But otherwise, I thought this was quite a nuanced adventure tale that wasn't like super gory, and it made bugs out to be good things that are cute and like try to cheer up their garden owners. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I will be keeping it. So those were most of the things that I read in the month of July. Please let me know in the comments down below what your highlights were for July. What was your hit and what was your miss? I definitely would say that Black Girl Unlimited was the biggest surprise for the month. That was good, and Curious George, the biggest surprise, that was bad. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.